Way back in the mid-1800s, 13-year-old Andrew Carnegie immigrated to the United States with his family from Scotland, and they settled in western Pennsylvania out near the Pittsburgh area, where at 13 years old Andrew worked in a cotton factory. This menial job earned him only $1.20 per week, but his is an inspiring rags to riches story. As he matured, Andrew earned money in more ways, and in time he was able to make some profitable investments that dramatically increased his standard of living. One of the pioneers of the U.S. oil industry, Carnegie began to earn the really big money at that time, becoming a multimillionaire. It has been said that Carnegie's fortune was the equivalent to almost $5 billion in today's money. But Carnegie wasn't your everyday millionaire, if there is such a thing. I say that because whereas nowadays it seems the wealthiest among us make headlines for donating thousands of dollars when they are literally sitting on millions, Carnegie reportedly gave away some 90% of his massive fortune before he died at the age of 89. The total donations are estimated around $350 million, and that is regular dollars, not adjusted for inflation either. Carnegie's philosophy was spelled out in one of his many essays that he wrote. He said, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." He was no hypocrite either, because he bequeathed just enough money for his heirs to live comfortably. In short, he simply decided if they wanted great wealth themselves, they would have to earn it. He was a big believer in allowing more than just his family to benefit from his wealth. Furthermore, in 1889, he wrote an essay that is included in a book later called The Gospel of Wealth and Other Timely Essays. In this work, he talked about a variety of subjects such as the economy, taxation, corporate philosophy, but he also wrote these words about his goal as a successful businessman. He said his goal is to set an example of modest living, shunning display or extravagance, to provide moderately for the legitimate wants of those dependent upon him, and after doing so to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, to produce the most beneficial results for the community. The man of wealth thus becoming the mere agent and trustee for his poorer brethren, bringing to their service his superior wisdom, experience, and ability to administer, doing for them better than they would or could do for themselves. End quote. We typically measure wealth in the form of dollars or material possessions, or some even measure it in power. But do we ever realize that there is a greater wealth that man will never achieve? The wealth I'm talking about is reserved for God alone. That is the ownership and stewardship of this world. That's where we'll begin in chapter 5 as we continue our look at the book of Revelation. We will be reading verses 1 through 14, which I believe is that entire chapter. The words are on the screen as always. "And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?' And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals.' And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, And in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. Now when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain, and have redeemed us to God by your blood, out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on the earth. Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and riches and wisdom, and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven, and on the earth, and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them, I heard saying, Blessing and honor and glory and power be to him who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb forever and ever. Then the 4 living creatures said, Amen. And the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him who lives forever and ever. The Lord's blessing be added to the reading and hearing of his holy word. Another word on Andrew Carnegie is that it most likely was his very poor upbringing that he never forgot, which gave him the desire to help others. God, on the other hand, is owner of more than millions of dollars. The whole world is his possession. And that's what we read about in Revelation 5 with this scroll that was sealed with 7 seals. The initial Greek reader of John's Revelation would recognize that a scroll is a legal document. It would be rolled up, strings would be tied around it, and sealed and attached to the scroll with wax. And there were 7 of these on this particular scroll. Only the one with legal possession of that document can open it. Therefore, it's commonly believed that the scroll that was in the hand of God is something like the title deed to the planet Earth. And now, to illustrate how the book of Revelation isn't just one standalone book with no connection to the rest of the Bible, here are a couple examples from the New Testament that apply to Revelation 5. You probably remember the scene where Jesus was tempted in the wilderness by Satan. Satan offered to Jesus all of the kingdoms of the world if he would only bow down and worship him. That is because Satan currently is the ruler of this world. But the good news is that Satan is ruling on borrowed time. There's also an instance in Matthew 21 where Jesus tells a parable of a vineyard landowner. That's the one where the owner puts vine dressers in charge of his vineyard while he's away. And that's representative of God putting his trust in Israel. However, the owner then sends servants to collect the fruit from the vines, but they are mistreated and killed. The servants represent the prophets and those who came before carrying God's word, and they weren't accepted by Israel. Then the owner sends his son, which should be pretty obvious, represents Jesus, and the son is killed. In the parable, Jesus then asked the people he's talking to, how should the landowner deal with these vine dressers? And the answer that they respond to him is that he should destroy the wicked men. Revelation 5 is like the landowner preparing to take possession of his vineyard. For the believer in Christ, this is certainly something that we should look forward to, because when Jesus takes back the earth, he will do away with all evil, and life will finally be as God intended at creation. And I've got to tell you, whenever I watch the news, read stories online, news stories, whatever they are, and you just see all the evil that's going about in the world, see how good people are being targeted because they are opposing evil, it makes me want Jesus to come back as soon as possible. It should give us all comfort to know the certainty of Jesus' return. There's a big however, though, with this. Because admittedly, it's selfish of me to want Jesus to come back right now, because I know that I'm saved and I know where I'm going to go if he does come back. And I think that's what a lot of Christians deal with. They know that they are saved and they want Jesus to come back for their benefit, but they have family or friends who haven't been saved yet. So we also know if he does come back now, that's going to mean trouble for the rest of them. They're going to have to go through that great tribulation that is in the upcoming chapters. We don't want our good friends and our family to have to endure that kind of situation. And I sort of think this might be a bit of the emotion that John is feeling in Revelation 5. With the scroll in the hand of God, John is now expecting someone to finally open this, thus bringing about a series of events that are going to follow. The angel asks if anyone is worthy to open it, and it's like you can hear a pin drop. Verse 3 says, "No one in heaven or on earth or under earth is worthy to open it," and this causes John to weep. Why is John crying? Well, this is something I'd like to explore a bit further here. We can speculate why he was moved to tears. It doesn't exactly tell us, but I think part of it could be that John realizes right there and then how bad, how depraved the basic human condition is. There is no one worthy to open this scroll. Let's go back to the Gospels again for a minute. Jesus encountered this rich young ruler. You may remember that story. And he asked Jesus, "What must I do to be saved?" That's the automatic human response to the problem. What must I do? Jesus told the man, "Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor." Not because you can't enter heaven with great wealth, but that's Jesus' way of exposing the man's heart. The ruler didn't want to give up all that he had because he had a selfish heart. And so this trick by Jesus exposed what he treasured the most, which was the material things of this world. Maybe, in a way, John is similar to that rich young ruler. Maybe his first instinct is like many of us, who among us can open the scroll? And he finds out that no one is worthy to do so. How often in life do you hear people say, all we can do now is pray? I hear that a lot, and the sentiment is based on the fact that we have now done all that we can do. Now we have no choice but to rely on God. Well, we have it backwards. Makes me want to say, why weren't you relying on God from the beginning? Maybe this would have been taken care of by now. John looks around and he finds there's no one here qualified for this task. It's not something that just anybody can do. It's something that only one person in particular can do, and that is Jesus. So all of a sudden for John, this drives home the point to him that this world is in such a sinful and terrible condition that no one is even close to qualifying for this very important task. This is the pattern of the Christian life. We read the Bible. Hopefully we learn more and more about God. We pay attention to the sermon every Sunday, pay attention in Bible study. Our biblical knowledge increases, and that's a good thing. If nothing else, it helps you when you play trivia games. I know that much. I love trivia games. And the more I play, the more answers I get right. And I start feeling pretty good about myself. I'm a pretty smart guy. Well, it's like watching Jeopardy, which I was doing this past week. I like to watch the high school championships first, because I get a lot of them correct, or some of them correct. And I think to myself, well, these high school kids aren't that smart. I mean, I can get these right, not to mention I'm so many years out of high school. Then, like this past week, we turn on the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions. That's a different story. You ever seen these people that are in the Tournament of Champions? They put me in the mind of people who read encyclopedias for fun, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, I'm not doing so hot with these questions. Let's just say if I were ever on that show by some mistake or something like that, I'd be asking Alex, can you repeat that answer one more time? What are you asking me? That kind of thing. In the same way, I get very humbled whenever I go from watching the high school championship to watching the Tournament of Champions. Something always seems to humble me in my spiritual walk as well. Right as I seem to be on top of that mountain, something happens to bring me back down to earth. Maybe you have a friend in the hospital, or maybe a problem arises in the church and we can't fix it right away. All of a sudden, we remember God is the one that we need to rely on, not on our own abilities, not our own knowledge. Inevitably, the problem will pass and start to head up the mountain again, start feeling pretty good about myself, and the cycle repeats, and it's a vicious one. Revelation 5 is a reminder of how much we need to rely on Jesus. The whole experience of the Christian life is manifest to us through the tears of John. That's one reason why John was weeping, but I think another reason may also be because as of this moment, God's plan is postponed. God is seated on the throne. He's holding the scroll. The elders ask who can open it. John is expecting it to be opened right then and there, but when the elder asks the question, he is in despair because he wants nothing more than that scroll to be opened as of that moment. It seems that God's plan once again is being put off until someone is identified who can finally open that scroll. And again, I think on some level we as Christian believers can identify with this. Even when we faithfully pray to God for an outcome, oftentimes the answer is not yet. And to be honest with you, that is the answer that I dislike the most from God, and it's the answer that I get most often from God. I think He's trying to tell me something. Oftentimes, I would almost rather have Him clearly tell me no, that way I can move on with the next thing. Think back to maybe when you were a teenager and you were searching for the right boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, what else do you do when you're a teenager, you know? Well, sometimes it feels like you're single and you're wandering through a desert and there's nothing here at all. Everyone else is in a relationship and they're happy, but here it's the three of us, me, myself, and I, you know. On the other hand, I have seen people who always seem to be in some kind of a relationship, no matter what. You know, they broke up yesterday and now they're with someone today. I never understand that other than to come to the conclusion that these must be the most insecure people ever because they cannot be happy unless they have someone else to give them happiness. It's not always fun to be single, but it's got to be better than being in a miserable relationship with someone where you wish you would rather be in a desert than with that person. This is God's not yet answer. And that's what John briefly gets in the passage before the scroll is opened. But then one of the elders says, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. Where the rest of the world searches in futility to find a way to God, Jesus has already triumphed, and He is the only one with the ability to open that scroll." The last point this morning stems from this revelation to us that Jesus is the only one who can open the scroll. Just like that, John's attitude does a 180. He weeps in despair 1 minute, and the very next minute he must be elated because everyone else in the scene is elated. Once that lamb that looked as if it had been slain appears, those 4 living creatures, along with the elders, fall down and worship. Thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands, it says, of angels join in, along with every single creature on earth. Imagine this. Now, if we go crazy over seeing a celebrity, meeting a celebrity, imagine how much better of an experience it'll be whenever we finally meet Jesus. I've read a lot of Bible experts who try to describe the sense of the state of our minds whenever this happens. Will we remember the bad things that we have done when we meet Jesus? Will we feel that, or how will we feel if we realize that loved ones didn't make it? What about the joy? Will it distract and take from our joy? What about an argument that I had with a believer 5 minutes ago? Will I still hold that grudge against them? I could take a guess at this like everyone else, but it would be just a guess. What I can tell you, though, is that Jesus specializes in turning something bad into something good. I don't think we see this any more than we do when Jesus is crucified. The disciples were certainly in despair after his death. So I often wonder, what was the day after Good Friday like? What do you think that Saturday was like for them? Just the day before, their lives were shaken up like they never would have believed. Now Jesus is dead. They need to recalculate their lives, figure out what is their purpose now. And that's a big and depressing task for someone to undergo. But we also see that dark situation didn't last very long. The very next morning, on the 3rd day, Christ arose from the grave. And instead of going back to his boat and fishing for a living, Peter's fortune changed again, and he was now commissioned to fish for men. Maybe we don't relate so much to a 2,000-year-old example. I'm reminded of a much more recent one where something very good comes from something that seems very bad. Consider John Dorenbos. He was a former NFL football player, and you may have seen him a couple years ago on America's Got Talent, trying to make a go at it, being a magician. Just last year, during the NFL training camp, the Philadelphia Eagles traded John Dorenbos to the New Orleans Saints. He said he liked it in Philadelphia, didn't really care to be traded, but didn't have any protection in his contract against him. So the quirk in the story is, you may not know, every player that's traded has to undergo a doctor's physical. During this physical, the doctor detected something very serious. John Dorenbos had an aortic aneurysm. He literally was rushed into the operating room to get this taken care of, having open heart surgery. If it were untreated, the aneurysm could have been fatal. New Orleans, of course, voided the trade because he could no longer play. And in the end, this trade that he was unhappy about to begin literally saved his life, since there's no telling what would have happened had the aneurysm not been detected. Furthermore, once he recovered, Dorenbos continued to work closely with the Eagles organization last year, although not as a player. So when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, the team honored John honored his dedication by giving him a Super Bowl ring. Again, none of this would have happened had he not been traded in the first place. In our lives, we only see these actual events unfolding before us, and we don't get to see what would happen if one decision were altered. What would happen if I did that instead of this? In this case, John Dorenbos actually did get a glimpse of what may have happened or may not have happened had the aneurysm not been detected. And it's a humbling lesson for all of us. We often experience disturbing events in life, but do we recognize the good that inevitably can follow? That's what John experienced in Revelation 5, and it's nothing that we aren't familiar with. I do want to clarify that God does not promise us that every bad thing in life will be followed by an equally good thing. But whenever the Lamb unrolls that scroll, we can be confident that whatever tribulation takes place will be followed by something very good, which will be the ultimate return of Jesus Christ to judge evil. Until then, and even after then, praise is due to God. I, for one, look forward to that day whenever every creature on heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them says, "To him who sits on the throne, to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. Amen." So I hope you don't think that this series on Revelation, on future events, that hopefully we're going to miss most of it, doesn't apply to you. This is about real life, things that we can relate this to. Whenever we are feeling like we're dealing with a situation that there's no good way out of it, I urge you more than anything to go to the Lord in prayer. It's something that we preachers talk about thousands and thousands of times, but it's because it's that important to do. He will remind you that He specializes in bringing good out of evil. Again, we need to take comfort that the book of Revelation is also about perseverance. There will be many who currently aren't believers in Christ now, but they will have to persevere like they never thought they would have if they are alive during that tribulation and come to faith in Jesus. The only way they will get through it is to rely on God. We, on the other hand, are in a much better position because we are saved now and we won't have to endure that great tribulation. Regardless, God has still promised to get us through our personal tribulations with His help, but we need to rely on Him for that to happen. And we can do so, persevere with His help. Let's now bow our heads and go to Him in prayer.